here, to see, look, watch, to hear and not be understood, to judge and be judged, to notice and be dismissed, to know there is pain and hurt, to absorb the beauty in the midst of the pain, to wonder about what is similar and what is different, to want to blend in, to know I can't, to be in a land, place, and space that is not my home. And while I knew as I wrote those words and after I read them that definitely applied to my own experience there, I also thought about how in many ways it would relate to the experiences of refugees in the sense that when they enter a new place or new country, everything is brand new: language, people, culture, customs, and in having to try to figure all of that out, I could only imagine just what it's like to carry all of that.
The vice mayor of Athens gave us a tour of the refugee camp, and he introduced us to a more political understanding of the circumstances for refugees in Greece and some of the obstacles that they face as a city with the influx of people coming to Athens, and how they had been very intentional in the way that they tried to provide for the basic needs of people, but also with the expectation that they would be a pass-through. People would move through the community and even through Greece into Western Europe, which is where people are seeking to go with the increased opportunities for jobs in Germany and Great Britain and so on. But due to recent closures of the border to Western Europe, similar to the closure of the border for all intents and purposes in the United States too, they've had to think a little bit more long term, and so there have been some recent adjustments to try to think about people being in Athens over a longer period of time.
The meeting with the ambassador as well was really interesting because similar to how it is in the US, where we have all of these different stories that are happening about refugee populations, different stories that are being told, and who knows which ones really even has a semblance of truth. There are all sorts of things on all sides of the issue. And the same thing is really going on in Greece as well, about refugees and the political status of the country and kind of everything. And kind of no matter where we went, we would hear something different. And sometimes you'd say, oh, maybe I need to question that source. Then you hear another one and say, maybe that's truth, but I don't really know. And when you're in a country like that where we knew pretty much nothing about the political landscape of the nation, it was so interesting to hear all of the different ways that people were interweaving the story, kind of no matter where we went, whether we were at refugee camp or we were at Melissa Network or we were with the ambassador or we were kind of seeing the historical sites of the land too and the different people we interacted with. There was really no story was the same. And in our conversation with the ambassador, what was really amazing is, as a foreigner in the country, right, he's aware of kind of all of those different things. So we were really able to kind of process, we heard this from this person and we heard this from this person. From your perspective, what really is the truth of what's happening here? And it really opened my eyes to kind of what I knew was happening here, but when you're invested in a country and you have the power to vote, you're, I think, often don't realize sometimes the things that you hear and what you end up believing. And so that was a moment where I went, this is a country where I have no idea what's going on, and I'm hearing all of these different things. What is truth?
He talked about conversations that have been attempted in the past, and that the sending countries, the countries where people are fleeing, didn't often have a voice. And some of the larger receiving countries really functioned to silence a lot of the sending countries, and they didn't feel heard. He also felt that in those conversations, nobody ever talked about the contribution of the migrants to the receiving country, the good, the beauty, the ways they help a culture and a country to grow. And those voices were silenced as well. That came out as one of the messages that I brought home with me, was this notion of contribution. Throughout our visits to the Melissa Project, to the refugee camp, and then again with the ambassador, there was this need for refugees to serve, a need that was coming from within themselves. There were, one of the things that the women do with the Melissa Project is they go out into the Greek homeless shelters and they serve meals. So they're not only serving other refugees, they're not only thinking about their own experience, they're going out, they want to serve. They want to have some kind of capital and contribution that they can feel like they're giving. We heard another story of a woman who lives at the refugee camp. I believe she was from Iran, and she would cook meals in her refugee home, in her small kitchen. She had a wagon, and she would pull the wagon out into the streets of Athens and serve hot meals to homeless Greeks on the streets, which incidentally there were a lot of. We walked by homeless people all the time because the economy in Greece is just not good. So this contribution, what is being brought to these countries by these refugees? When we think about the makeup of our country and everything that has been contributed by people who have come here from other places, that part of the conversation was being left out, and the ambassador highlighted that, acknowledged that, and talked about how that was missing.
Meeting with the representatives from the Melissa Project was an incredibly powerful experience to sit around a table enjoying coffee and sweet treats and laughter and conversation and just sharing of stories. That was powerful. And also to be in that space, to think of an NGO in the middle of a neighborhood that's busy and there's a lot of traffic and people, and to walk into this facility that is so bright with a color and with laughter and with artwork that reflects women's stories and experiences. It was very different than I think what I was expecting. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but just very different to walk into a place that is providing support in some very difficult scenarios and situations, and to see all of the good that was happening there. I was particularly struck by the word Melissa, which we were told translates into butterflies. And so as the women commit to this program and the different components of it, the goal is for them to emerge as butterflies, and to think about the stages that a butterfly will go through. Melissa Project allows women the opportunity to go through stages of empowerment and to be able to tell their stories and find support in the women and the directors and the staff of that incredible program. So to see an art class in session was a beautiful thing. To meet the children that were being cared for while their moms participated in different activities, it was a place of hope in the midst of a very difficult and dark place, both physical space, but also where people were at that moment in their lives, to be able to know and to know that they could come to a place and feel acceptance and feel understood, and to be given the affirmation that who they are matters and their stories matter. So that was really a powerful experience to be able to be at the Melissa Network.
So the mission of the nonprofit was actually to serve that group in a multitude of ways, but it started with language. It often does when you're working with groups that are coming into a country without the language of the dominant language of the country. And so the director told us about how many different languages that they have to offer services and education. They're teaching people from all these variety of countries to speak Greek, but also some English. I thought it was interesting that the very populations that are at war or in conflict with another in their countries of origin must come into a single setting for their language instruction. One of the sort of rules of it is that we're going to come together and work together. And it seemed like that women and children, she shared with us, could accept this more readily than some of the men who have come into the country.
It was helpful at the Melissa Network to see women working to help other women, because so many of these refugees have been women and children, and that's the case in the United States too, as we see more families and more children coming through. One of the things that I found most striking was I mentioned in answer to a previous question that it was previous generations of refugees in Greece, the refugees from the Philippines, who were most active in helping this most current influx of refugees. And that dovetailed with what the Mexican ambassador told us, because Mexico and Greece are very similar in being right now pass-through countries. So there's not refugees who are native to Greece, native to Mexico so much, moving to other countries, but they are being used as pass-through countries, people trying to get somewhere else. And so I asked the Mexican ambassador, does it make a difference in Mexico in terms of public opinion and willingness to help refugees that at one time in the past, Mexico was, you might say, a sending country, a country from which people were trying to leave and find a better life elsewhere? And he said, sadly, actually, no, it didn't. That public opinion against refugees from Central America was actually quite high. A lot of the Mexican border towns, public sentiment was against the refugees. And so I found that surprising in conjunction with the experience of the Filipino refugees. And it seemed like they had to have that actual concrete experience of hardship and that memory for themselves that made them willing to step out and take action to help other people.
So one of the most powerful experiences on the trip was the day that we visited the refugee camp. It was the day that most of us were looking forward to and also dreading at the same time, not knowing at all what to expect. Upon entering the camp, the residents live in shipping containers that were set up in different rows throughout the entire camp. It was interesting, there was a section of the camp that had been kind of hastily put together by the military, and it was kind of comical because those, you could tell, they were very, very organized rows and very close together, and the other ones had slightly wider alleyways and walking paths through them. All of the homes were painted beautiful pastel colors, and there were murals painted on many of them as well. The camp was beautiful. It was clean. It was orderly. One of the highlights to me were seeing many fathers walking through the camp, holding hands with little children. There's a kindergarten on site that's run by the University of Athens. And so there were men walking their children to kindergarten with the big backpacks on that kind of cover the whole body of the little child. There was a huge soccer field, and there was a man kind of working out with his little kiddo running circles around him that many of us could recognize. And so the camp is at capacity. There are about 1,700 people that live there, and I believe more than 30 nationalities are represented there.
I think food is a beautiful way to share stories and to facilitate connections between people, even when we come from different backgrounds and stories and experiences and lives. There's something that's beautiful when people gather around a table and engage in conversation that's deep and that allows for that friendship or that connection to continue growing. There were several instances where I saw that play out on our trip. Definitely in our core group, our Hope group, being able to sit around a table and to get to know one another and to share about our families and backgrounds and experiences and why we chose to participate in the immersion experience. There was so much that came out of those conversations that I will definitely carry with me for a long time, and also seeing how it played out there in the different places we went when we visited the NGO called the Melissa Project, to walk into the building, a colorful, beautiful building, and to see women gathered around a table doing an art project together. When we were meeting with the coordinators and the directors of that program or that NGO, to be able to sit at a table with coffee and sweet treats and to smile and to laugh and to learn from one another. So in many ways, food is very simple, but it also provides a beautiful way to connect with someone else. And again, thinking back to the recipe book that the Project Eleona's Camp, the NGO from there, how they put this amazing book together where people from the camp could tell their stories, to share photographs of these foods that were so meaningful to them and had connections to family and to culture and to home countries. It was just beautiful to see how they were able to build that connection in and through and among all the individuals that were there, by giving them the opportunity to share their stories.
For me, one of kind of going back to the theme of storytelling as well, I just keep processing the idea that how food is often a method of storytelling too. We think about, oh, this is a dish that my grandmother used to make and now I make it for my family, and how that's really important. And we kind of heard that throughout the trip as well. People would bring us things and they would say, yeah, this is a very traditional dish and this is my grandmother's recipe. Or even within the cookbook that we received, many of us have purchased since, that's supporting the Elena's project within the camp. That cookbook tells the stories of these women and these men, and many of the stories of the food that they publish the recipes for, it's a family recipe. It's something that their family has been eating for centuries, and this is really important to them. And when they get to this country of Greece, they're kind of trying to go and make these recipes that are dear to them, represent their country and who they are as a family, and that's really an important and sort of cherished piece of culture and food, and tells the story of who they are and where they've gotten to where they are at that time.
I teach a class on food and faith, so this is something I anticipate talking about in my class, how food is a way that we connect with people. Food is a way we bond with people in our own culture and establish a common culture, but it's also a way that we're able to connect with people who are different from us as we share those differences and enjoy different food cultures. So that was probably the most striking thing to me about food and culture.
I had the opportunity to talk with a woman who works in the Department of Sociology, like I do here. It's a combined department. They don't have a social work program per se, but they do offer coursework towards social work practice. It's somewhat different in that country. And so I met with a woman who is the most likely partner for me to establish an ongoing relationship, where our plan is to connect through technology and to link our two courses together over the course of the year. My global social work course and her course that addresses poverty and issues of poverty populations in Greece. Our plan is to teach, lecture across these campuses through technology, for each of us to be a visiting lecturer at least once in the semester, and then to connect our students through the use of technology. We write a blog. Students pick a particular area of interest as it relates to people in poverty, refugees in particular, and the issues that they face in their community. communities. And so our students are going to share a blog that we develop together and release together at the end of the semester. So I think it will be really fun for students to connect directly with another student and with the class and with the professor in another country.
It was definitely helpful to spend time with our Hope team in advance and preparing for all aspects of the trip. And it was also a highlight to meet with the faculty and staff from the American College of Greece in Athens. We were able to spend the better part of a day with them, meeting different individuals from their library, from administrative staff. And I think one connection that was really valuable for me personally and professionally was getting to meet the director of Education Unites, which is a program that provides support to students who come from a refugee background but have entered the college in terms of providing support as they pursue higher education. And so that's something that I would like to continue keeping in contact with that individual, also with the collaborations here on our own team, whether that's through the readings that we use, the conversations that we have amongst ourselves and even with our students. But I know there will be definitely connections between what we learned there, the people we met, and how we hope to keep that message alive here.
I think just the importance of narratives is what I learned. I think for me, that was the overarching theme throughout kind of the entire trip that became really apparent, is the importance of storytelling, the importance of empowering people to be able to share their stories, the importance of understanding what stories you're hearing and where that's coming from. And just what does that mean globally? What does that mean not globally? What does that mean for Hope College? What does that mean for me as a librarian and who I am? What does that mean for my students and my faculty? What does that mean for all of these different people on all of those different levels of who we are in this particular time and place in history? And I think that was surprising for me in a lot of ways. I was expecting storytelling to be a little bit of a theme, but the levels of where that ended up being was really profound for me, and is something that I'm still kind of mulling over. What does that mean in terms of action, right? I haven't gotten to that place yet. Might take maybe ask me in a year, but I think that that's the most surprising and also the biggest takeaway I've gotten, is how important stories are for people and humanity and who we are as people and who we are as global citizens as well. Yeah.
Try. So after a few hours break, my roommate napped. I sat with my noise canceling headphones on. We gathered again as a group of 5 at an Indian restaurant near the Acropolis. And after we finished eating, we stayed at the table, and I introduced this process that I would like us to do of Lectio Divina. And I said what would happen is we would each go around the table and share a word or an image from the experience. We could explain it a little bit if we wanted to, but the big point was that nobody got to share anybody else's moment, and we didn't really even get to give each other feedback or even ask questions at that point, because it was too fresh, it was too raw. And so the rest of us would simply sit in silence and acknowledge that feeling. And it was one of the most powerful experiences of the trip for me. And so just to close, I will give you the words that we shared around the table that night in Athens after our experience at the refugee camp. Home, safe, anxiety, beauty, and struggle.